Hello, everyone. Kelly Mason is here to see you, Mr. Williams. Damn. I sighed and nodded. All right, Amber, send her in. I got up from my desk, mentally bracing myself. Kelly walked in with her usual air of poise. At nearly 60, she was a striking woman with an elegance that commanded attention. We'd known each other for years. My wife had been her husband's executive assistant, and we'd socialized more times than I could count. I'd always respected her, until recently. Mrs. Mason, please, come in. Have a seat. Can I get you something to drink? I asked, keeping my tone cordial. Thank you, Alan. But no, she replied. So, it's Mrs. Mason now? To my understanding, you've been Mrs. Mason for over 3 decades, I said evenly. Yes, but that's not what I mean. For the last 8 years, you've called me Kelly. Now it's back to Mrs. Mason? I let out a quiet sigh. Recent events have made me reassess things. I thought we were friends, but clearly, I was wrong. Using your first name just doesn't feel right anymore. A flicker of sadness crossed her face, a subtle but unmistakable shift in the atmosphere. I assume one of those recent events involves discovering that your wife is my husband's mistress, and that I've supported it. Is that what we're discussing today? She's struggling without you, Alan, Kelly said after a moment. She's barely holding it together, and it's affecting her work. That's not my problem, Mrs. Mason, I snapped. If anything, that's on you. Ashley and Travis, not me. Will you at least hear me out? Let me explain why this doesn't mean what you think it does. I felt a surge of anger rise in me. That's the problem, isn't it? Everyone keeps trying to convince me it doesn't matter, that I should just accept my wife sleeping with her boss. Well, I won't. Ever. Is that clear enough? Can I at least give you my side of the story? She asked, her voice softer now. Ashley says you won't let her explain. Will you let me? I hesitated, weighing my options. If nothing else, I might be able to turn this situation to my advantage. Up until I found out that Kelly Mason had not only condoned her husband's affair with my wife, but actively helped them keep it from me. I considered her a woman of integrity. Despite everything, I hoped she still had some decency left. Fine, I said. I'll listen, but on one condition. Once you've said your piece, you'll go to Ashley and convince her that there's no fixing this and she needs to sign the damn divorce papers. I can't promise to convince her, Kelly countered. No, but you can try, I shot back. Right now, it's 3 against 1. You, Travis, and her lawyer, who I'm sure you're bankrolling, are making it impossible for me to move on. So, yes, you can try. She sighed, visibly torn. We only wanted to help. You're right. We felt responsible for the fallout in your marriage, and we tried to support Ashley. She's like a daughter to us, which is precisely why your husband shouldn't be sleeping with her. But if she sees you as a mother figure, maybe she'll actually listen to you. Her parents are gone, and she's told me before how much she values you. If you told her what you did was wrong instead of justifying it, maybe she'd finally get it. Kelly's expression betrayed her inner conflict. She wanted to defend Ashley, but couldn't ignore the weight of my words. Eventually, she seemed to realize there was no avoiding it. All right, Alan, she relented. But like I said, no promises. None expected, I replied. She straightened in her chair, her tone growing serious. Let me be clear. I love my husband. Everything I've done was for him. It wasn't easy for me to let him be with other women, but I made that decision for his sake. About 7 years ago, I completely lost interest in sex. I tried to meet his needs, but it brought me no joy. Over time, it got worse. It became uncomfortable and even painful. I saw doctors, got second opinions, but the conclusion was always the same. Menopause and age had changed my body to the point that sex was unbearable for me. I imagine that must have been incredibly difficult, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. It was, she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. Sex was something I truly enjoyed, and losing that part of my life. It's hard to describe how much it affected me. And Travis, his libido didn't wane at all. But when he realized how much pain I was in, he insisted we stop. He didn't want me to suffer, and that showed me just how deeply he loved me. Okay, Mrs. Mason, I said, my tone sharp. As difficult as that sounds, it's a natural part of aging. and a sacrifice a husband might make for his wife. It still doesn't justify him sleeping with someone else's wife. I can't say I disagree, she admitted, her voice quieter now. And that was never our intention. We tried to maintain some semblance of intimacy without intercourse, even though it wasn't something we were used to. Honestly, it never appealed much to me, and now, with no sexual desire at all, it was even less enticing. Neither of us felt entirely comfortable with him being that intimate with me in such a way. As I listened to Kelly Mason talk, I tried to picture what it must feel like to reach a point where you have absolutely no interest in being sexually intimate with the person you've loved your whole life. Before all of this, I couldn't imagine not wanting Ashley or not feeling the need to show her, in some way, how much I loved her. BJ's had been a regular part of our sex life, but I suppose everyone has their own preferences and experiences. Kelly continued, her tone matter of fact. Eventually, I decided to suggest that Travis take a lover. When I first brought it up, he was furious and completely shut me down. But as time went on, his frustration and agitation grew. I kept bringing the idea up, and he finally admitted something needed to change. At first, we tried traditional dating services, thinking we might find someone who could offer him a steady relationship, but that didn't work. Those women were looking for long-term commitments, not to become someone's mistress. Then we tried a few of those so-called hookup sites, but that wasn't any better. The women on there were casual to the point that it made us uncomfortable. They didn't seem very selective, and we couldn't predict what kind of situation we'd be stepping into. She paused before continuing. As a last resort, we turned to a site geared towards sugar daddy arrangements. That actually worked for a while. We met a lovely young woman, and things went smoothly for about 6 months. Eventually, though, she met someone special, got married, and started a family. They've even had a baby now. That's wonderful for them, Mrs. Mason, I interjected, trying to keep my voice neutral. But can we cut to the chase here? I'm almost there, she replied, unfazed. I just want you to understand that we explored every possible avenue to solve our problem, except for asking Travis to accept that the sexual part of his life was over. Well, I said, my sarcasm evident, maybe that's the one thing you should have tried first. She sighed but continued without addressing my tone. Actually, that was the first thing we tried. But Travis became so irritable and short-tempered that it was clear it wasn't sustainable. Ashley was aware of everything we were doing. She even helped us out. She'd make dinner reservations for Travis and his dates, offer him advice, little things like that. She was like a daughter to us, so we confided in her about the struggles we were having. In fact, she was the one who suggested the sugar daddy arrangement. I let out a sharp laugh. Of course she did. She even helped us try it again, Kelly went on. But the second woman we met turned out to be a nightmare. She threatened to expose us unless we paid her an outrageous sum of money. We dealt with her, but the experience soured us on the whole idea. That's when Ashley stepped in. Stepped in? Or laid down? I snapped, my frustration boiling over. Kelly ignored my jab, her composure unshaken. We were brainstorming, trying to come up with another solution, and Ashley suggested that perhaps Travis could find a married woman. Someone in an open marriage or whose husband was frequently away. A woman who wanted companionship but wouldn't expect more from him or make things public. I imagine that wasn't easy to find, I said dryly. It wasn't, Kelly admitted. Maybe someone in a different social circle would have had more success, but we weren't so lucky. Ashley discreetly inquired, but nothing came of it. During this time, Travis resorted to a few anonymous encounters, but they brought him little satisfaction. He's never been the type to bounce from woman to woman. Even when we first met, he wanted one person to build a life with. She hesitated for a moment, then continued. Finally, Ashley proposed that she take on the role herself. So it was her idea? I asked, my voice tightening. Yes, Kelly admitted. But that's what she does. That's what Travis hired her for years ago. She's a problem solver. Most of the steps we took were based on her suggestions because Travis and I had no idea where to begin. She argued that this was the only solution. She assured us she would never try to blackmail us or make anything public. She was in a happy marriage, so she'd never want more from Travis. And she added, they already loved each other. Not the way you and she did, or the way Travis and I do, but in their own way. They'd worked closely for years and were very close. The only complication was her husband, you. It all sounds so perfectly logical, I said bitterly. It was logical, Kelly insisted. They already spent a lot of time together because of work. They traveled together, as you know, and she spent a lot of time in his office. The key was not to change anything about that routine. Any interactions they had needed to happen during times they'd normally be together. She couldn't start staying late, coming in early, or sneaking off to motels. Everything had to appear perfectly normal. Jesus Christ, I muttered, shaking my head. This was planned down to the last detail, all for the sake of deceiving me. Deceiving everyone, Kelly corrected gently. But yes, keeping you from finding out was part of it. Ashley was very aware that you knew many of the people she worked with. Not friends exactly, but acquaintances. We couldn't risk anyone talking, so everything had to be meticulously concealed. They stayed in separate rooms when they traveled, but she would often spend evenings in his. Did they get their kicks doing it while she was on the phone with me? I spat, unable to contain my anger any longer. Alan, please, Kelly said, her voice calm but firm. I understand that you're hurt, but you're trying to make this sound more sordid and humiliating than it was. The truth is, Kelly began. She cherished those phone calls with you. She wouldn't even let Travis stay in the room when she talked to you. It was important to her to keep what she was doing with him separate. In her mind, she was just helping a friend solve a problem. Nothing more. To Ashley, her real love was always you, and she never let him intrude on that. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. I'm almost touched by how devoted she is, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She does love you, Alan. She needs you, Kelly said, her voice soft but firm. It all worked smoothly until one of the employees apparently saw something suspicious and tipped you off. From what I understand, when you showed up at the office, no one even tried to stop you from walking right into Travis's office and finding them on the couch. I shook my head in disbelief, though her words only added to the anger simmering inside me. And how did that make you feel, Mrs. Mason? I asked dryly. She hesitated. At first, I'm ashamed to admit, we were angry at the staff for their lack of loyalty, but it didn't take long for us to realize how hypocritical that was. A wife cheating on her husband and her boss, and his wife. Helping her do it, upset over loyalty? It was ridiculous. That's putting it mildly, I said sharply. We saw the irony soon enough, she admitted. And after that, well, you know the story. You refused to talk to her, threw her out of the house? Correction, I interjected. It was my house before we even met. There was no way I was leaving. She said you wouldn't give her a chance to explain, that she came home to find you packing her things, and when she tried to talk, you didn't say a word. You just packed her bags and set them outside. Apparently, you only said 5 words to her. You'll hear from my attorney, I said, nodding. That's accurate. She didn't understand, Kelly said, her voice tinged with regret. From her perspective, this could have been the first time, and she didn't know why you wouldn't listen. She had no idea how much you'd already uncovered, the planning, the investigation. She didn't know you'd spoken to hotel staff and learned her room was rarely used, or that you talked to people at the companies they visited and found out they almost always extended their trips by a day to have more time together. Exactly, I said. I needed to know how deep the lies went. But even with all of that, it was just circumstantial evidence until I saw it with my own eyes. That's why I waited to confront her. Alan, she loves you, Kelly said earnestly. Isn't there any way to rebuild what you had? Mrs. Mason, I said, ignoring her plea. Where has Ashley been staying since I threw her out? Kelly hesitated, then said quietly, she's been staying with us. Right. And are they still sleeping together? I asked, fixing her with a hard stare. Alan, don't lie to me, I warned. You should know by now that I probably know more than you think I do. She sighed. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a biological need. They both have strong libidos, and this situation has been incredibly stressful. Exactly, I snapped. She's not sorry for what she did. Only that I found out. Only that I was hurt. She spent all her time trying to justify it, trying to convince me it didn't mean anything and that it didn't really hurt us. That she wasn't spending any more time with Travis than usual, just spending it differently. And if I could just understand that, everything would be fine. But the truth is, she never offered to stop. She never suggested quitting her job or ending the affair. All she's done is try to make me accept it as if it's just part of her job. Kelly looked uncomfortable, but I pressed on. And now she's living with the man she's sleeping with under your roof, and hasn't even tried to change the behavior that led to the divorce in the first place. Meanwhile, she's trying to convince me to stop the divorce. It's completely delusional. She loves you, Kelly said softly. She truly believes you love her enough to understand and forgive her. Mrs. Mason, I said, my tone firm, you've been married a long time. You probably know that love alone doesn't sustain a marriage. There has to be trust and respect, too. Those three things, love, trust, and respect, are the pillars of a relationship. Lose one, and things get shaky. Lose two, and the whole thing collapses. So yes, I still love her. But the other two pillars are gone, and they can't be rebuilt. If she truly loves me, she'll accept that there's no going back and let me move on. Kelly looked at me with a pained expression. Please, Alan, try to convince her to let go. I've done what I promised, I said flatly. I listened to everything you had to say, but I'm not willing to give her another chance. A one-time mistake I could maybe forgive. But this was deliberate, calculated, and went on for far too long. There's absolutely no chance. Kelly sighed deeply. I'm sorry things turned out this way, Alan. It was never our intention to drive you apart. She loves you more than I can express, and losing you will devastate her. But I'll keep my promise. I'll talk to her. I guess it's the least I can do, Kelly said as she stood up. I rose as well and walked her to the front door of the building. I could tell she'd hoped for a hug, but she had to settle for a firm handshake instead. Thank you for hearing me out, Alan, she said. At least I can tell her you know the truth. The truth as she sees it anyway, I replied. She gave me a small, knowing smile, nodded, and turned to leave. As I watched her walk away, I hoped this was the last hurdle and that things would finally start falling into place. But deep down, I wasn't optimistic. I went back to my office, shut the door, and sank into my chair, burying my face in my hands. I wasn't crying, not exactly, but there was a dull ache in my head, the kind you get when you're on the verge of tears. The conversation with Kelly Mason had been a draining, emotional whirlwind, and the exhaustion hit me like a ton of bricks. The sound of the door opening jolted me out of my thoughts. Everything all right, Alan? I looked up to see Amber, our department's assistant. She was a few years younger than me, with a curvy figure and long, straight blonde hair she usually kept tied back in a ponytail. On rare occasions, when we were close, she'd let it down, knowing how much I loved the way it framed her face. I'll be fine, I said, giving her a tired smile. That was the wife of that jackass Mason. She came by to explain. When she gave me her name, I figured that's who she was, Amber said, leaning against the doorframe. I take it she tried to convince you to take Ashley back? Of course, I said with a shrug. Same tired argument Ashley used. It didn't mean anything. You didn't lose anything. What's the harm? She promised she'd try to get Ashley to sign the papers, though. Amber's expression softened. We're still on for tonight, right? Or was that too much? I can call my parents and reschedule. No way, I said, shaking my head. I've been looking forward to meeting them, and I'm not waiting any longer. I'll be fine. Amber crossed the room, settling onto my lap and wrapping her arms around my neck. She kissed me gently, and my hand drifted to her side, stroking her softly. I felt her relax against me. You'd better stop that, she said with a playful grin, unless you're ready to take me right here on the floor. Don't tempt me, I replied, smirking. Do you think Kelly will have any luck getting Ashley to sign the papers? Amber asked, resting her head on my shoulder. Our wedding date's getting closer every day. I know, baby. Believe me, I know, I said, kissing the top of her head. Even if she doesn't, the judge seems fed up with their stalling tactics. I don't think it'll be an issue. She stood up with a smile, glancing back to make sure the office door was closed. Then, with a mischievous grin, she lifted her top and leaned in close, pressing her bare skin to my face. I didn't need any encouragement to give each side the attention it deserved. She always joked it was to keep things balanced. Moments later, she winked and left the room. For the record, Amber and I had known each other for 3 years, but we only started seeing each other 6 months ago, nearly a year after I'd walked in on Travis and Ashley and filed for divorce. Despite still being legally married to Ashley at the time, neither the law nor I considered my relationship with Amber adultery. Kelly Mason's change of heart eventually led to the outcome I'd been hoping for. While Ashley initially resisted, she came to realize that even knowing the full story wasn't going to change my mind. Reluctantly, she signed the divorce papers and waived alimony. She earned a good salary and didn't need the money, which was at least a small consolation. Kids had never been part of our marriage. Ashley's career always came first, and her frequent travel meant we were both constantly busy. It just never happened. Now, Ashley's life revolves around Travis Mason, and, to a lesser extent, Kelly. She still works for him and, as far as I know, is still his mistress. To drive the point home, she continues to live with the Masons full-time. That's about all I know, since I've made a point to avoid them ever since the divorce was finalized. Amber's parents, thankfully, seem to like me, and we've been married for nearly 3 years now. She's due any day with our first child, and she stopped working 3 months ago. I make more than enough to support us, and we both agreed we didn't want anyone else raising our baby. I'm hoping for a girl, and Amber was sweet enough to agree with me. We'll find out soon enough. I'd be lying if I said I didn't love Ashley at all anymore. A small part of me still does, but it's nothing compared to how much I love Amber. She's my everything, and we're completely happy and devoted to each other. And, for the record, yes, after we got married, I did finally take her on the floor of my office. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel. Bye.